People writing video games don't understand people. So I just watched the HBO series The Last of Us, which aired at the beginning of 2023. I'm recording this later in 2023, but I'd been meaning to get to it. I did. I have many thoughts that I'm combining into a kind of a review, but kind of like a, I don't know, like, I guess we could just call it that, or a reflection on the show and what I think the show represents. The fact that it was made with certain things being presented in the show the way that they were. So first, let me say there are tons of spoilers in this clip. Tons. So if you haven't watched the show, do not watch this clip until afterwards unless you just don't care. Second, I'll say, and just as importantly, the fucking thing kept me up until 5 a.m. And I binge watched it all the way through like the second to last episode to the point where like my head was hurting. So that's a pretty good indicator that the show kept my interest and kept me involved and had me basically on the edge of my seat. With that said, I've noticed certain things, several things that I want to draw attention to. So, just a quick recap. The series is based on the video game of the same name, which was released in 2013 by the Naughty Dog gaming studio. Neil Druckmann, one of the creators of the game, the writer of the game, actually, is also the writer of the series. And they had several actors from the game who voiced the characters in the game also appear in the series. Now, the two leads on the show, played by Pedro Pascal, who plays Joel, and Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie, did not appear in the video game. And also there were not a ton, but Druckmann and the director of the show, Craig Mazin, did take some liberties with the storyline and the settings. They didn't completely change the tone of the game, but they did put certain fresh twists on things. And that was intentional. Craig Mazin directed the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, which I thought was wall-to-wall excellent. For me, it was just riveting. I thought it was amazing television. So the premise is that cordyceps, which is a fungal organism that does actually exist in the world, mutates to be able to infect humans. Now, this is based on there's an actual organism that does this to insects, and I've seen footage like on a nature program of an ant getting infected. It's really fucking creepy. It's like gives me the chills even thinking about it. Like the fungus gets into the ant, slowly takes over its brain and body, and the ant just loses its mind. And I remember in the footage I watched, two ants carry off another ant and throw it like out of the colony, because if they allow it to stay, it can infect the rest of the colony. So this is the premise, that this type of organism somehow adapts to be able to do this to humans, and then humans turn into basically zombies with like fungal spores growing out of them. A really horrifying idea. And in some ways, this is a zombie series. In some ways, it's a post-apocalyptic, like dystopian future kind of thing, although the technology aspect is removed, because in the story, the end of the world basically happens in 2003. So all these advancements we've had since then with, like, the rapid development of the internet and social media and all this other stuff just gets halted. And so it's almost like a kind of return to primitivism. In some ways it's an anti-hero story. In some ways it definitely is a road story. And wouldn't quite say it's a buddy film, but it is sort of a family drama. There's that aspect sort of wedged in there as well. And I think it works rather effectively. I mean, it keeps you going, kept me going from episode to episode to episode. But I noticed a few things that stood out and that I thought ultimately detracted. So one of the first things, like, as you go along, I don't remember what episode it was, but you meet this character named Bill, who is presented as the stereotype of a quote-unquote doomsday prepper. He has a bunker in his basement. He's heavily into guns, which is an understatement. He has monitors. He's a survivalist. And when the federal troops come to collect survivors after this pandemic outbreak of this fungal infection really gets underway, you see him in his basement and he says, "Not now, you jackboot New World Order motherfuckers," or something like that. It's like, okay. I didn't listen to all of the podcast where Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann are talking about their motives, but it was clear to me, or the sense I got, was that they're making fun of this kind of stereotype of what is often presented as right-wing extremist, conspiracy nut, quote-unquote tinfoil hat, quote-unquote like Alex Jones type person who's really, really, really on edge about the power of the federal government and doesn't want to see a one world New World Order, that kind of thing. So it seems to me like they're lampooning that kind of character. And they even go further and pair him up in a gay relationship with a character who is the stereotype of like an NPR listening, like the opposite stereotype of that, right? And so it's supposed to be somewhat humorous and like, these two opposites attract and literally become an odd couple, not odd couple like the show, but an actual couple. And I got the sense while I was watching this that like they were trying to knock this kind of this template of a person, like in their minds, they were kind of trying to knock this person down a peg and put him in an absurd situation where it's like, actually, this person's in the closet and he's gay and has never had a boyfriend and now he gets to have one. And it's like the kind of person we think this person should be paired up with so that he can actually be more human and more better off, right? By embracing this side. But this is the first of a few different self-owns in this series because what they end up inadvertently doing is showing us, and I think this is completely unconscious, I do not think this was intentional. They end up showing us that the stereotype of the Frank character, who becomes Bill's life partner, they even get married. They marry themselves in one of the episodes. It shows us, well, actually, you are craving a masculine, capable, violent man who's good at surviving and good at protection and good at protecting you. And it's like, like they were kind of making fun of this guy, but actually they're revealing that there's a craving for this person. I do like that they also made the Bill character really good at cooking. I appreciated that, because I do think people tend to be more complex than even they themselves might know to present about themselves. I love the fact, like I really, really appreciated this, that Bill is super into guns and super into wine. Because there are people that would check those two boxes. There are also super, super manly, quote unquote manly, gay men who are very tough, who satisfy what we would think of as this sort of masculine, either exaggerated masculine model, or the ideal masculine, wherever you are on that, right? There are gay dudes that will kick your ass, will fucking shoot guns, will blow you up on a football field, will fuck you up. And I want to see more people like that, right? Because that's not the stereotype. So I like that. I mean, I feel like these filmmakers like inadvertently stumbled on something cool by making this character more complex than even they were going to give him room to be. Because they kind of made him out to be a cartoon. They made him out to be lonely, quote unquote paranoid. And yet, everything he was afraid of comes true in the story. So it's like, wait a minute, who's making fun of, who's the butt of this joke here, right? The people that he refers to as New World Order jackboot motherfuckers actually are New World Order jackboot motherfuckers, right? So there's that. There is a character named Kathleen who runs one of the, counterinsurgent troops of people who revolt against these federal police, basically, in one of the episodes that takes place in Kansas City. So in the story, most of the population of the world dies, but there are these, at least in the USA, there are these what are called quarantine zones, or they call them QZs in the story, which I thought was really cheesy, which is why I think video game people should not make drama for film and TV, because I don't think they're equipped to bring the requisite depth to stories or characters, which I'll get into again in a little bit. But so in Kansas City, the in that quarantine zone, the underground resistance actually end up usurping, killing off the police, and they end up ruling. And this one character who leads them, Kathleen, is like, again, it's sort of like an unwitting cell phone, because she's overly emotional. She refuses to be pragmatic. She's on this total, like unyielding quest for revenge. Ends up endangering everybody around her, everybody under her who follows her, and basically brings herself down and everybody else because she won't adapt to the circumstances. She won't properly prioritize what's actually threatening their settlement versus like, no, I'm going to make a target out of this one person who I have a vendetta against because I need revenge so bad. Now you got a bunch of dudes carrying machine guns following this person. There's no way in hell they wouldn't take action and be like, no, we got to take care of this other issue right like yesterday. If you watch the show, you'll know what it is. Because basically there's a swarm of infected zombies about to burst out from where they're being contained. And she goes, no, we'll deal with this later. I think this is a complete failure to understand how people would actually interact. Nobody would follow this leader. One of the most interesting and I think compelling things about this series is that it is ultimately a meditation on leadership. Over and over and over and over throughout the show, we get these references to people who supposedly have a natural, who we are shown have an inclination to do things that other people follow them. I don't think the show properly explores and certainly doesn't answer the question of what is it about certain people that they are natural at being quote unquote leaders. Why do other people fall in line behind certain people? What is that quality? We see character after character after character who in different ways too fulfill that description, and yet I'm sitting there wondering, well, why would anyone listen to this person? The minute they detected this one thing with the zombies about to bust loose, and she was like, no, we're going to go chasing after this one guy because he caused my brother to be killed by the federal police. Man, fuck that. No. Especially dudes that are capable of extreme violence, ruthlessness, shooting people, right, at her command. You're going to get a mutiny right there. Sorry. Especially in a world where survival is at such a premium, right? In a world 20 years into a future where there are still human beings walking after a zombie plague outbreak, the people who make good decisions or the most practical decisions to ensure the survival of everyone else, those are the people that will rise to the top. Not the person who's going to put emotionality above practicality. No. So that's another cell phone. It's kind of like an unconscious expression of, well, if we're going to lean too hard into our emotions, we're going to end up in fucking trouble. And we need people to be somewhat detached to be able to make judgment calls. This character clearly cannot, is blinded by her need to avenge her brother's death. And it makes you doubt how she got there in the first place. Now, she's ruthless, but it's not very convincing. Okay. So there's that. Then we meet this leader of a religious congregation who similarly just seems to have this grip on his community, who he's doing everything he can to keep alive, and he will stop at nothing, and he's completely ruthless and can make hard decisions. Basically, these people have resorted to eating other people because they've run out of food for the winter. So they're like, okay, we need to eat people. And he and only his second in command are the only ones who know this. So everybody else unwittingly is eating human meat. Now this was explored in the Netflix series The Rain as well, but it's a different twist on that. If you saw that series, this is not quite the same, but it's sort of echoes it. I wonder to what degree, although The Rain wasn't around when the Last of Us game was written, so I guess they get some clemency there. And again, and you're watching and you're like, okay, this guy has a hold on other men with guns. And while he's a different type of character than Kathleen, and he is driven by different instincts, how is it that he has such a grip on these other people? Particularly the men around him who follow him, who will do his bidding. I think the show does a more... It's more enticing, like the complexity of this character and the combination of this incredible sense, like this unbreakable sense of drive that this guy has to be a leader, the egomania that it takes to presume that you are the one whose job it is to take care of other people, and what that does to cloud and rot the mind and completely destroy one's sense of perspective. I've often argued that leaders are destroyed by their followers. I think that once you get into a position where people will follow you no matter what, and they don't challenge you, that's when you are destroyed as your psyche becomes shattered by that. You are undone by the fact that there's no limit, there's no pushback. I think even the most authoritarian people end up being devoured from the inside out by their own sense that it is their divine right to tell others what to do. I think we are all built to have some semblance that there's got to be some accountability. There's got to be some response and responsibility, or response from your flock, and that you then have a responsibility or you will be removed. I think any community that does not have that is unhealthy. And so I do think they did a better job here with this character than with the Kathleen character, where they're like, okay, what is it that makes someone gravitate to be a religious, paternalistic, authoritarian who rules by fear and coercion and manipulation? But I don't think they had they didn't apply the requisite depth or understanding of human nature, human behavior, to really flesh this guy out the way he should have been. I did listen to the podcast episode where they discuss this character, and one of them says, I can't remember if it's Druckmann or Mason, but he says, oh, he's the definition of a gaslighter and a manipulator and an abuser. Sorry, you lost me there. Okay? Those pat terms just don't begin to cover, to canvas the full range of why people behave this way. At the same time, they also give him credit for being someone who makes hard calls that other people can't, and for wanting to take care of the people who have come to him. So they do get some credit for sort of fumbling part of the way there, but I don't think they ultimately deliver, although I think the episode is really, really gripping and the most genuinely creepy and like just nerve-wracking of all the episodes. There's also a female character who leads one of the resistance groups, who is, I guess, high-ranking in sort of the national network of those groups. And again, you don't really get a sense of, well, why did people follow her, right? There's a female leader of a settlement in Wyoming, which is supposed to be based on Jackson Hole, but they refer to it as Jackson, Wyoming. And she is a former district attorney, and it's like, I don't have any issue with presenting women in leadership roles, but if you're going to do that, I would like to see a real, like a less contrived motivation for showing us how women might lead differently or not, right? And for showing us how an individual character, what stuff they have to yield compliance and trust from everyone else. You have to trust a leader that they, especially in a situation like this, when they have your future and your survival in their hands. You have to be able to buy into the culture they create. And with the exception of the one preacher character, you don't really see why that would function. So this settlement is idyllic. They have Christmas trees. It's like almost paradise, right? They've managed to create something really, really beautiful that every person left on the earth would want to be a part of. And they don't really give us a sense of how this would be plausible. Yes, they're capable of violence too. And the thing about her, that character is she's super by the book. Like, you have to follow the rules or you're out, right? Or there's trials and shit like that. I thought that section was undermined by, they keep sort of suggesting that there's something not quite right going on here, right? So the main character's brother ends up in that settlement, and the brothers have a dialogue, and the brother is partner to the leader of the Jackson settlement, and the camera keeps training on him. Like, he looks uneasy. Like, is there something? Is he actually going to go help his brother and surprise us? Is he going to betray his brother? We don't know, and it doesn't really ever amount to anything. There's no payoff on the suspense. It's like, we can't quite gauge where his brother's at or what his agenda is, right? And they just let that drop. There's also a series of either biracial characters, or there's like an interracial element in the film, which felt unnatural to me. Now, granted, you have a drastically reduced global population. You have people doing a lot of moving around, trying to get to different settlements. Of course, there's going to be like a shakeup, and there's going to be an interracial component here. I myself am biracial. I am the product of an interracial relationship, right? I understand these people exist. Let's just put it that way, right? But it's like, not every time, but several times you see a character like this, it's as if there was an attempt to, we want to show a woman in a position of power. We want to show a biracial character here. And it just doesn't feel like it would organically happen this way. There is a character who, the main two characters, they meet these two characters in Kansas City, an older brother and a little boy, his younger brother, who he's trying to keep safe. That to me felt very, very natural, like someone you would meet, right? But all these other sort of different configurations of people just felt a little bit odd to me. Now, it would be awesome to think that in the event of a worldwide cataclysm, we would then be literally living in a post-racial world. I think that would be cool. I think that would be, if that's the way it happened, and you ended up forming tribes based on who was around you and what your allegiances were. If there truly weren't, I mean, if it drastically reduced racial and ethnic animus, then awesome. Then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is what the world would look like. But it felt like a casting quota to me. It didn't feel like, hey, this is a world I can believe. Which gets me to the overall thrust of this series, which is the relationship between Ellie, who's a 14-year-old girl, and Joel. So Bella Ramsey's character and Pedro Pascal's character. It's overtly meant to, from the very beginning, strike this chord of, oh, this is a parental-child type of relationship. They're not related, but she lost her parents. He's lost his daughter. So, of course, they fulfill this, or there's the potential for them to fulfill this role for one another. He is capable of incredible violence. He can shut his emotions off. He can kill people for the wrong reasons, although we don't see that much in the series until the very, very end. We don't see him doing things just for personal gain. We sort of see this burnt out shell of a person who lost his kid to this terrible thing that happens, and so doesn't really have his heart intact anymore. He doesn't have a moral center anymore. And then the savagery that people have to resort to in order to just survive, he's willing to go there. We don't see that much. He talks about it, but I think that I think what this show stumbles into to me represents an expression that we are collectively looking. In 2023, we are looking for a return of the male protector archetype back into the world. And I would even argue that the best way to bring that back is for each person to connect with that side of them, because I think women have that side of them too, right? Each of us has an inner, that template somewhere working in our psyche. And if you are a parent, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know whether that's what the creators of the show meant. There are clearly choices in the show where it seems like they are playing according to the sort of current trade winds of cultural norms. They're playing into to satisfy some of those things. But yet underneath all that, there's this almost comically relentless, almost invincible, not quite, but almost invincible. Like this guy has like more strength and more killing power. It's almost like a Rambo type figure, which I thought they overplayed that a little bit. I didn't think it was quite believable. I thought it would have been cooler. His brother was a Desert Storm vet in the story. It would have been a lot cooler if they just made it like he did some time in the service and was like a marksman or something. Because it's like, how did this guy get so fucking skilled at gunplay, right? It just doesn't seem very plausible. But you watch this show and you're like, man, we need more. In fact, the Bill character writes a letter to the Joel character and says there's certain men who are born to protect. It's like, there it is right there, right? like the show is like telling you that there are certain men who are built for this. And so how do we make room for that guy again now in 2023 going into 2024? How do we make room for that guy in ourselves? And I also thought this was accidental because I think this is a reflection of not so adept writing than it is a real inquest into like, you know, behavior and human nature. But like, this guy doesn't always know when to turn it off. He doesn't know always how to apply it for the greater good. And in fact, will sometimes way overdo it. Well, that's a question we have to answer. Because we expect people to be able to pull the fucking trigger. To be able to do something hard and rough and mean and violent and sometimes ruthless, right? We expect, like, our survival depends on people being able to do that. And it always has depended on that, although we have the illusion otherwise now. But I would personally say, with the way things appear to be pointing, you can make fun of a prepper all you want, but you better know one. You better know somebody who knows how to operate firearms and defend themselves, grow their own food, knows how to fix things, all that stuff. Or a suite of people who can, like, you know, like a group, a pod of people who can each take different aspects of that, right? You better know people who are nurturing. You better know people who know how to make soup. You better know people who knit. Like, we all need to interdepend with these skills. We're going to need people to make music and make people laugh and comfort each other, all that stuff, right? We're going to need therapists, good listeners. But when we make room, right, when we lean on this kind of guy or this archetype, because it isn't always a man. Like, anybody listening, I'm sure we've all known women who fit this mold as well, right? Whether they're butch or not. When they have that quality, how do we make room for them to be able to dial it down, right? Because if everybody's afraid of them, then you can't challenge them. You can't say, whoa, let's take it easy. Let's, can't say that. This show sort of pokes blindly at that question and leaves it open-ended. I'm fine with that. But I don't think it's because the filmmakers meant to really give us a good foundation for asking those questions. The show does not support the questions it falls into. I would say lastly, the trope of the hardened guy who just broods and doesn't say much. I mean, man, that's been done a lot. And so has the fucking wisecracking teenage kid. Like, I was a fucking teenager once. I've known when I was a teenager, I knew other teenagers in life, you see them interacting. I've never met a fucking teenager who's constantly quipping with the wisecracks, who's always witty, who's got that, like, relentless sense of humor. I mean, it gets fucking grating listening to this character. Now, they set it up so that she's actually very vulnerable and very afraid, and this is her armor. Again, perfectly, that's awesome. Actually, that's a really cool device, and it's real, and that's what people do. But it's just so overdone. And in one of the episodes where they discuss Ellie, the actress who played her in the game actually makes a cameo as her mother in one of the final episode. And it's like she has such an idealized version of what this kid is capable of and how smart she is and how she's got a bullshit detector and she's super empathetic. It's like, okay, do you know any real kids? No kid is all those fucking things. Okay? Like, yeah, and they don't make her superhuman. They do make her very vulnerable. They do show her in situations where she's got to kind of push past her own capabilities as best she can, but it's a little overdone, and they keep hinting at her being a natural born leader, which I don't see evidence of. I don't see how they back that up, and so I think it's a failed opportunity. I don't think they really give Bella Ramsey much room. And this could have been a really super, super interesting character who ends up being just overbearing for 80% of the time we see her on screen. She's just overbearing, which is not the fault of Bella Ramsey. It's just like, why did you write her this way? Why did you write a sort of Rambo-like character say, no more, you don't ask me about this anymore because I can't talk about my emotions. Come on, man. Okay, so with all that said, like I mentioned, this series kept me fucking watching it hours past the point where I should have. So I think kudos there. Also, watching the behind the scenes stuff of this is a massive undertaking. I mean, there's scenes with like hundreds of extras, or it looks that way, with prosthetic props and special effects and fungi bursting out of people's, like growing out of people's heads so that they almost look like a coral, like a mass human coral reef or, mushroom growth or something moving at once. And so, I mean, they also filmed in many different locations throughout the country and North America, and they filmed in Calgary also. They filmed in like super cold, frigid conditions. So kudos. Look, the work it takes to get one of these series done versus the work it takes for me to stand here in my hallway in front of my linen closet and talk to you about it is obviously 1 trillion to 1. I mean, we know these people put in the work, but we're also accustomed to a standard from HBO that I don't think this series quite lives up to. I think there's a sort of unfulfilled potential, but also a really intriguing, I think, accidental question that this show leaves us with, which is, where do we leave room for the return of the protector in our world, in our hearts? I don't know, but I'm eager to find out, and I'm psyched that this show put that person back in our heads in a way that mostly feels good, in spite of his flaws and in spite of some of his choices and in spite of what is sort of a fall from grace at the end. It still felt good to embrace that, to ask, where is that in us? Where can we revive, reanimate, re-engage that type? Where can we do that? So those are my thoughts on The Last of Us. I also have to say, I completely misinterpreted the ending. So I thought she was starting to get sick anyway, even though she's immune to the fungus. Like, she has the fungus in her in a way that allows her to be immune. But I thought that because they show her being foggy in the last couple of episodes and like being sort of distant and absent, you're not sure if it's from trauma or from her being preoccupied. So the whole quest is he's supposed to take her to a place where they can then extract something from her blood that can then create a cure for everyone, right? And that's what the resistance leader wants. But then it turns out when he finally gets her there, they're going to have to do brain surgery and she's probably going to die. Now, I thought this whole fucking ridiculousness could have had a very simple, humane... it could have been written into the script where they just give her a choice to say, look, this is what you're doing. But instead, the resistance leader, who was friends with her mother and made her mother a dying wish that she would protect her child and feels that very deeply, right, still makes the call, I can't tell her what's going to happen to her because it would be too scary and we need this solution. So if we have to do this and sacrifice her life, then we're going to do it. Joel does not accept that, basically kills everybody around and, takes her with him. But then she starts to be foggy. And I thought, okay, she's going to die anyway now. That's the irony, the bitter, sad, tragic irony of this series. He killed all these other people because he didn't want to sacrifice her and he didn't think it was fair, and he loves her at this point and wants to be her father figure, wants to be in her life, right? Wants to be that for her, and then it turns out she's going to die anyway. That I thought was really poetic. I'm like, whoa. But I listened to the podcast and I don't think that's what they meant at all. In fact, I know that's not what they meant because there's a sequel to the video game where she's in it and he's in it too, so the characters. And there is a season 2 of this show currently in the works. So I don't know what I missed. The ending is a lot more, I guess, straightforward than what I thought they were doing. It's she's gonna live, basically, right? But it's also still tragic because it's like, oh shit, I had the chance to save the world and you took that from me. And I guess that's what starts their dynamic and basically capsizes their relationship. And that's where their relationship goes in the future. It's like sort of broken by that because he basically broke her trust. But it's like, I don't know, who the fuck would ever feel bad that someone saved their life if you hadn't been told that your life was going to be sacrificed to save the world? It's one thing if like you made the choice and someone halted the process and then shot everybody and you're like, oh, yo, dude, like I chose to do this. Fuck, like, come on. But again, this is a reflection of like people writing video games don't understand people. No one's going to be upset about that. No one's going to be like, you mean I could have saved the world? You're going to be conflicted, but you're not going to hold it against the person who fucking saved you when the person you trusted lied to you, told you were going to be okay. We're just going to do some tests on you and blah, 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 and we're going to put you in surgery and then we're going to save the world and you'll be fine. No, you're going to be fucking pissed at that person too. So, come on. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Really appreciate you hanging out with me in this video. You can support the channel in a number of ways. You can hit the like and subscribe buttons. You can make a donation via Venmo, or you can buy me a coffee. Those are all linked in the description below. On both of those platforms, it's at FeedbackDef on Venmo and Coffee. You can also subscribe to my Substack, feedbackdef.substack.com, linked in the description below. It's a free tier, and there's a couple paying tiers. For Feedback Def, I'm Saby RK, the apostate music journalist. Over and out. me. This is... What's really gross is my hair sticking out like that.